got a seafood pizza out there, and or a crab pizza. It's not out there yet. He's cooking some more. That's my
Your glasses over by the soda machine, and the food's out there, we'll have some food right here in just a minute.
Should we wait for the food here?
Oh, you can go get it out there, these guys get it. So it's gonna be in both places, you can get it right here,
Okay.
but we waited for people to come before we.
Okay. Yeah, we're waiting on the women.
Thank you.
Good luck.
What's happening? How you doing?
Don't shake my hand. I got all was cool.
Oh,
I'd love to shake your hand, heck or whatever, but I'm probably not in any shape to do that. I'm on the downside.
yeah, I've been dealing with that all week with my employees. Everybody's still up. Hope you're the same. Don't shake my hand. That's important.
I think we should. Struggling concept of.
I would like to see how what they're planning to do it.
How do we fund it? How do we fund it?
Right?
You know, and I read a short basically says, you will pay. This one, in the states that have left the most,
Talk to Chris, he said whatever you wanna do as far as.
Yeah, I can get it to the outside if you want it out there.
Yep.
Okay.
And then I'll control, we're just gonna use the TV mic, volume
Oh, okay. Cool.
tonight and everything. And eventually we can try to get some sound bars or something mounted right there.
Outside.
As far as moving the camera to get what you were talking about,
Oh, he said go ahead and.
that's not a bad idea. Let's just move it back here, take
Yeah.
it out of there, but do the same telescope.
Is this Chris?
Yeah,
Okay.
trust me, I don't do any of that. But,
Creative.
he is. But I think I like the telescoping idea. But
Yeah.
we'll do it from back here.
You wouldn't even need to lower it, I don't think.
Really?
Because if you lowered it, then you'd have heads in the way. I would keep it right above that door.
Okay.
I seriously think it would be like,
It'd be cheaper right now, too.
yeah, you can do
So
it.
do you want
next
to
door.
find a mounting bracket besides the one we made?
Yeah, or we make another one, but there's a bracket for like $80 if you want it to look good. Just sit there.
Make it happen.
Okay.
If you need my credit card, let me know.
Nah, it's no big deal. That's what they're seeing right now. It's live on YouTube. I'm trying to figure out how to make sure I have the microphone, which I think this is the microphone.
You mean
but I
you're
don't
gonna
know.
talk?
I can talk. Just no, it's me talking. Hold on.
Yeah.
remember way back when I was first enlisted, I couldn't gain a pound on our skin.
Those were the days, right?
I remember in the medical, remember to go to the weigh, you know, water fountain, and there, make sure I. Catering any tonight?
No.
Test, 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 test.
I'm good at that. I'm good at eating. No, I'm good at eating.
grab a cup and a plate.
But I figured, hey, I need to, also really,
Well, no, I don't think,
I need to fix it. Or, I guess I can do it, I just don't want to, you know?
yeah, that's what I was.
So I got pretty much 100% of the sugar out of my eyes. It was very hard at first. It's not now.
have to buy a. Yeah, it's not connected on the internet.
I sent you a regular phone text. This is what you were supposed to get.
Oh, well, I ain't get anything like that.
All right, what's it?
She told me that it wouldn't come through. She said, I'll show you how to do it when I get up there.
Okay.
So, I don't know.
It's got nothing to do with the internet. It's all on your phone.
Yeah, it's hard work. Life is too complicated. I get over this side really usually every month.
Okay.
You don't pay every month? You come shopping once a month, get some taters and bacon?
Well, this place though. Here last year, I think once.
Coming Sunday night?
Well, I don't think I've been here. I know this I drove on a Sunday when they.
Rob Carter's supposed to be Sunday night.
Who, what?
Rob Carter's supposed to be Sunday night.
Be too embarrassing when I gotta ask them. Like last summer, late last summer, I was at what they call a watch party I was invited to. And them folks, seemed like everybody liked the radio station, but it seemed like it was unanimous about the Carter.
I don't like anybody else on this station. I can't stand Peggy Hubbard.
The reason why they don't like him is because he was campaigning for the Democrats.
Well, they don't like Trump. He was on Trump's team 4 years ago. But he likes him now. That guy behind you. Hey, that man's got a lot of problems. My wife.
Considering all the alternatives.
Well, Jesus Christ wasn't running.
The ones that were running, all the alternatives. A long time ago, I thought voted for the alternate party, some like John Kennedy was running and others.
Why is Trump not telling us yet? He's not telling us. We're signing papers. He's not telling us to kill Kennedy and all the whole thing.
You know what that
He told us he was going to do it the last time he lied into.
I don't know what that's going to do for our fuel prices or for much anything else. Sexual
Hey,
perversion.
hey, I'm worried about now.
If I don't know, or if I do know, it's not going to be any different. I'm still going to get what I get. That's all I'm going to get.
Did you push any snow?
I ended up leaving my pocket phone in my pocket. Just let him send it or leave message or whatever. And when I get caught up, I check it and listen to it. I doubled my retirement. Yeah. For January, I tell you, 1,500, maybe 1,600.
You wrote all that down. You got me taxes on it. You wrote all that down,
I wrote nothing down.
Oh, my
I didn't have time for that nonsense. No time.
Well, you just called out chicks. That's okay.
Well, we need taxes on $800.
It's all a tip.
But that week was so bad, I just didn't answer my phone. Just like this fellow.
Did you ever get stuck?
It's stuck. I got out of it. I'm going to get pretty short.
Hello? Check, check. Check, 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 check. Check. Can I have everybody's attention just for 1 second? We've got a few more guests than we expected. The TVs out in the restaurant will have this exact same thing. So if you cannot find seating, you can more than welcome to sit out in the restaurant and you'll be seeing the exact same thing, hearing the exact same thing. So I'm just giving you that option or you can stand. So I encourage you to go out there, sit down and relax, get something to eat.
Hello, everybody. Hello, everyone. If we could keep it down to a soft murmur, please, while you're eating your delicious food provided by the host today. Good job, Mike. So I just wanted to start the process and thank you all for being here. It's a great turnout, and I think there's more people in the other room, like Mike had said, that they could go in through there. For those who don't know me, I'm a Representative John Simmons. This is my district, District 109, so thank you for coming to my district. We'll introduce my colleagues later on, and I thank them for coming to the district, and really want to thank Americans for Prosperity, the backdrop that you see, and some of you may be familiar with them, and some may not, but they're a great organization that do a lot of education for us as legislators. They also do a lot that consumers can understand, and they talk about prosperity. What better way to be prosperous and pay little or no taxes to the government, right? So they're big on that. They're going around the state with a big tour. They started already down in Springfield, where two of my colleagues are from, and they represent that area. So I'm excited for them to come to our district, to Franklin County, and chose this area to present to my constituents and to Senator Brown's constituents. And so a lot of great information. We're excited up in the Capitol about all the talk about tax reductions, tax reform, and tax elimination. The gentlemen will talk more specifically about that and all the details that they do. They're the smart ones in the room. I'm just here to introduce them. But thank you for being here. I want to thank Americans for Prosperity for supporting this. They're great in electing good, common sense, conservative, with your money type of people. They always help different candidates around the state, and they're a great resource for us, and they can be a great resource for you. I want to introduce Gary, who is the state director of Americans for Prosperity. He works hard. He's up at the Capitol a lot, and he did a lot of work in helping other candidates get elected to his organization. So I want you to welcome Gary from Americans for Prosperity.
Good evening, everyone. Welcome. Thank you so much for coming out and spending your Friday evening with us. And thank you to the hosts here at Moe's Pizza for this wonderful layout and for letting us come in here tonight. It's always good to support a good conservative business owner, so we really appreciate you having us, and I hope all of you will continue to come back long after we're gone and keep these guys in business, because they've been really wonderful to work with tonight. I also want to commend you on your choice of a legislator. John Simmons here was one of our candidates that we endorsed in the primary, one of our success stories. He's a great partner in Jefferson City, and we very much appreciate you sending him to work with us. He's doing a great job, and we're going to do great things in the next couple years with him. So thank you very much. As the representative said, my name is Gary Hollis. I'm the state director for Americans for Prosperity in Missouri. We are a conservative grassroots organization that has a chapter in 36 states around the country. We're looking to grow that in 2025, adding some new states. Most of you all know Savannah, who's back here. She is our grassroots engagement director for your region. She does a great job, and I know many of you work with her. We're really excited for the conservative mood that's kind of sweeping the country right now. We're very excited about Governor Kehoe. He came into office with a mandate of 59%, promising conservative government. And one of those things he ran on was getting rid of the state income tax in Missouri. I can tell you there's about 800 bills going through the legislature right now, and this was the very first one that we endorsed, because I truly believe there is nothing more transformative for the state and its future growth than to get Missouri's state income tax to zero. So on your table, there's a card here, and maybe some of you are a little undecided and you want to hear tonight as they talk about it before you've formulate an opinion. But if you do leave here tonight agreeing with us, we encourage you to scan the QR code right there, and that will allow you to email your legislators. just go to our website, which is afpmo.com. Now, I know, fortunately, many of your legislators are the bill sponsors, and they're here tonight, but go ahead and email them anyway, because they're going to want to keep in touch with you, let you know the progress of this bill as it moves through the legislature. And it also gives them reinforcement to be able to show these are emails from my constituents that want to see real change to our tax structure here in Missouri. So I encourage you, if you like what you hear tonight, to please send that email and let them know that you support the bill and that you appreciate it. Now I'm going to go ahead and turn it over to someone who's been a great partner, someone that I've really enjoyed working with over the last couple months as we started talking about this early on, even before session kicked off, and that's Representative Bishop Davidson. He is out of Republic, and he was the very first sponsor of this bill in the House. So I just want to welcome him up here to talk a little bit more about it, and so please give him a warm welcome. Thank you.
Thank you again to AFP for being the founder of our feast tonight. Thank you, Senator Brown and Representative Simmons, for hosting us here in your district. I really like Washington. I think this is a lovely part of the state. Curtis and I are from Springfield area, but as I've always said, you are constituents of mine too, because the policy and the laws that we make in the legislature don't just affect the constituents that I have back home, they affect all of Missourians. This bill is the process of a lot of work, of a huge coalition, a coalition we're going to ask you to join by the end of tonight. And it began a few years ago, but has really taken off in these last few months of people who have gathered around. And we realized how important this bill was because of Governor Kehoe's vision. We realized how important this legislation was because we had folks like Art Laffer and Grover Norquist, people from all walks of life coming in and saying this needs to get done. I had a survey of my district, and I tell you what, a majority of Democrats think that their income tax has to go, and a supermajority, of course, of Republicans were asking for the same as we surveyed the folks back home in my district. When we realized how important it was, we started thinking through, how are we going to market this? How are we going to communicate with people? And there's a lot of different things. You know, I got to sponsor the Second Amendment Preservation Act when I was a freshman, and we called it SAPA. It was a great name. We spread it far and wide. We all knew what it was. And we tried to come up with a name for this, and we thought, you know, there's really just nothing simpler than eliminating the income tax. Everyone knows exactly what you're saying, 0% income tax. It's not hard to communicate. No one has to ask a follow-up question. But we wanted to gather around at least something clear that you could put in an email line. And it was decided, I don't know at what point in time, but it was decided that we really probably needed to get HJR1. And in the House, you actually have to be the first one to file, and it's given a number based off of the order in which it's filed. And so I decided, you know what, I'm not an early bird, but I'm going to get up really early, and I'm going to go stay at the Capitol, and I'm going to make sure that we get HJR1 and HB 100 so that we can communicate far and wide to folks, to the grassroots, to normal Missourians, what bills it is that we're trying to get behind. I had heard horror stories that some of my colleagues would get up at 3 in the morning and go stand in line to get that first slot. And I not just heard horror stories, I had seen it as they got filed earlier and earlier in the morning. And I was stressed out. I was staying up in Jefferson City the night before. I was thinking, okay, what time do I need to get up? Does it need to be 3? And the last thing I wanted was to show up at 3:30 in the morning and have someone that was already there, and then you lost the whole process to begin with. And so at 7:30 at night, I decided, you know what, I'm going to take a shower. I don't want to stink in the morning. And I'm just going to go and I'm going to sit in the Capitol right now. I'm just going to sit right outside the chief clerk's office. So I get there about 8:30 at night. Lo and behold, no one was there, as you might have expected. And I get to the 3rd floor, and the doors open up. And I tell you, I know that God is on our side because a huge couch was sitting in the hallway. Which is not normal. If you've been to the Capitol, we don't just have couches sitting in the halls. And so what had happened is a lawmaker was moving out, and he moved the couch outside in the hall, so I dragged that couch over to the clerk's office. I laid down, I got a blanket, popped my shoes off, had a really nice night's sleep, and lo and behold, around 3:30 in the morning, someone comes up and they're trying to get in line. And I wake, I stir, and I kind of come up from under my blankets. I go, I'm here first. And I go back to sleep. So a couple hours, I wake up, we get the bill filed, and now the legislative process of eliminating my income tax, their income tax, your income tax begins. But I tell you, that start never was going to anticipate all of the work and the effort that it would take to get it across the finish line. And we have had so many good conversations, and the vision's pretty clear. And we're going to let Q&A at the end happen, and that's going to be when we can talk through some of the particulars of the policy, and I know some of these guys might discuss it as well. But for me, after being in the legislature for 4 years, it's become very important for me to ask myself, why is it that I'm doing this? Because I'll be honest, it's not hard to forget. I've got hundreds of people that will laugh at any joke I tell. It doesn't matter if it's funny, right? I've got people trying to get me to do this or do that, trying to influence me this way or that way. It's easy to forget why you're there. And I started to ask myself, well, why is it that I'm there? And I've got a good family that keeps me grounded. And I started to think, well, I want the average Missourian, I want them to first have a livable wage. I want them to be able to buy their own house if they'd like. I'd like them to be able to afford a car or two, one for him, one for his spouse. I'd like for him to be able to have 3 kids without having to do the finances and budgeting and thinking, should we have another one? I want to be able to put enough money aside for maybe 1 or 2 of those kids to go to college, because I don't think every kid needs to go to college. I'd like for him to be able to buy a used car when his oldest daughter turns 16, right? I'd like him to be able to take his wife out every other weekend for a nice dinner, and I'd like him to be able to take his family out maybe once a month. I'd like him to be able to afford a couple subscriptions and a TV so that he can enjoy himself in his own home. I'd like for him to be able to travel down to Florida every couple years and maybe go down to Branson in the off years. And I tell you what, that's not happening anymore. It's getting harder and harder for a life like that to be led. And I started to realize that wages are stagnating, that housing is up. And they'll tell you that housing's not. I've heard folks, they'll tell me, oh, I paid a 15% mortgage in 1983. You got to do the whole picture math. Because the truth of the matter is these houses are 4 times proportionately, that housing payment is 4 times proportionally what it was back in 1983. Healthcare has gone up. Education isn't reliable. We can't trust it to educate your kids very well anymore. And what kind of future does that leave us? And then I started to realize, you take this vision of what a life ought to be here in Missouri, and you break it up into little bits. And you start to sort it out amongst the policy changes, right? And the things that need to happen at the state level. Keeping your eye on that vision, of course. And you start to group it into things that are the most important, the most pressing, the thing we need to do now, to things that you could maybe do later or maybe do 5 years from now as it gets more and more important. You got to triage. And you start to find out that one particular thing undermines good living wages, undermines that housing costs. It undermines reasonable health care costs. And it has an effect on literally every single part of our life. And I'm talking about, of course, the income tax, which can sound kind of boring and a little bit dry to some, but I'm trying to give it some life. Because these things are connected to real people and real actions. Our dollars are not just little transactional things. They're actually our time, right? Being traded and invested for others around us, for the things that we love. Our efforts and our labor. And it's high time that we stop penalizing a person for those efforts and for that labor. And so we've set about eliminating the income tax. And it's been tremendous to see the sort of effort that's coalesced around it. But the reason we're doing this tax tour, and this is stop number 2, and hopefully there are many, many more to come, is not only because the folks in this room will have a place in accomplishing this in the next 3 months during our session, but if we pass this in May, and I say if because it only happens if you help, if we pass this in May, it then goes to the ballot. And so the team we have, whether it be Gary or Curtis or Ben or John, and there's about 24 others that I could name off just like that. We've got solid committees lined up to hear these bills. We've got grassroots organizations around the states who are putting in their effort. We've got a good team, but it's not good enough because what we're trying to do is actually change the course of Missouri altogether. And I'll go even bigger. If we change Missouri now in this way, there's a dozen other states who think they should be doing the same thing, and they're already working on this, and they're failing. And it's time that Missouri be a leader. And it's time that Missouri show them the way. And when middle-of-the-road Missouri, the show-me state, takes action on something that has not only been so important, but perhaps is most important right now, I guarantee you there's going to be a lot of other states that follow suit, that feel emboldened by us and emboldened by what we do here. And so we've set about, and a lot of folks want to know how, and the how is pretty simple. We've got to get rid of the income tax as quickly as possible. You've got 3 main ways to do that. You can either utilize your growth to buy down your rate, and we can talk about the particulars of that, but your economy grows like this, which means your revenues grow like this. The problem is your government spending has grown like this. Doesn't need to. If it were linear and just growing like this, a good, steady, reasonable rate, right? Kind of like a family budget. Then you could capture the excess revenue. And that excess revenue, let's not be obscure about it. That excess revenue is because folks like you are working hard, being innovative, getting job raises, starting businesses, whatever it might be. We're going to capture that revenue and we're going to buy down our rate and say, you know what, maybe it doesn't need to just be more government spending. That's one method, right? You utilize your growth. Another method is you look at your budget long and hard and you go, where are these inefficiencies? Because I know they're there. And I'll tell you, they're there. It's estimated sometimes that 22% of Medicaid payments are fraudulent in Missouri. Okay, 22%, and it's about 44% of our budget. And so what does that mean altogether? That means about 8 cents of every dollar you pay to the government is just going to a single fraudulent program. We're not even talking about the fraudulence in other programs. So if you don't think there are efficiencies to be found, I can tell you there absolutely are. So you find those efficiencies, and you can use that to get money back into the pockets of people. And then you can also replace revenue. I always say no tax is tolerable, but some taxes are more tolerable. The most intolerable tax there is an income tax. It's devastating. It is a toxic poison to an economy. And you see it at every single level of the supply chain. It affects things without you even knowing about it. And then, of course, it affects you right where you know about it in your pocketbook. You see it on your paycheck. Or you see it in April. That is the most intolerable tax there is. It was introduced in 1913 with a constitutional amendment. About 100 years ago, Missouri started at 0.5%. That was the rate of tax. And they said they wouldn't go any higher. Of course they did, right? And so you look at other taxes that are more tolerable, and I'll tell you what I think is more tolerable is a tax that I can control. And what's the tax that I can control? It's a tax on the things that I consume. It's on the goods and services that I consume. And that's something I can budget, I can control, I can see. And it's added in at the very end of that supply chain, so you're not getting all these distortions that go this way and that way and are hidden from you, the taxpayer. It is economically the best sort of tax there is, and like I said, most tolerable. It's kind of an asterisk. And so between these 3 methods, between growth, between seeking efficiencies, and between looking at replacement, it's probably a combination of all 3 of these that gets rid of our tax rate the fastest. And we'll have a good conversation about what that looks like, because you start to put on timelines and say, well, I want to do this in 20 years or 15 years or 10 years or 5 years. It's just as simple as doing the math. You just got to kind of move this toggle this way and that toggle that way. And I look forward to getting into the questions that this room will have. But I just wanted to thank you for being here. Thank you for being engaged. I'm sure not all of you are convinced, but we're here to show you there is a better way forward. But I'm also here to ask you to come alongside us when it's time to move and take those steps forward. We talked about the team, and we've got some of them here. We've got 6 sponsors in the Senate. You guys remember that the Senate was pretty hard to work with body these last couple years? And now we've got 6 senators who are shoulder to shoulder pushing this legislation together. And we're fortunate to have 2 of them right here. You're fortunate to have one of them representing you in the Senate. And that's the one I'd like to introduce to you now. Senator Ben Brown has been elected for, I guess, two years now. Yeah, I mean, 2022. Yeah, 2022. And has already quickly emerged as a leader in the Senate, as someone that folks from all around the building come to talk to see what is the path forward, what can we accomplish, can you help? Because they're seeking his stamp of approval, and it's an important stamp to get. He's the chair of the committee that these bills are in right now. If my bill gets over to the Senate, Lord willing, it'll be his committee that I get to present to then. And so I don't know if I need to introduce him to you already, but Senator Ben Brown, please welcome him to the stage. Thank you, brother.
Well, thank you so much for coming out, everybody. And Mike, perfect timing. Thank you to you, Mike, and everyone here at Moe's. You know, going back years, long before I ever envisioned I'd even be running for this office, I remember coming to this exact spot, and he was always just so hospitable, hosting events for all sorts of conservative causes, and it just what a great member of the community he's been, and what an impact he's made. So thank you for that. I also would like to thank my state rep, John Simmons, for being here tonight and giving us that great introduction, and a couple of my colleagues and fellow bill sponsors, Bishop Davidson and Senator Curtis Trent. You know, I had a very long 5-minute commute from my house right here in Washington. I imagine both of them had to drive quite a bit further, so I really greatly appreciate them coming out to help advocate for such a great cause. So, you know, there's a lot of taxes out there, and I'm not a big fan of really any of them. So why income tax? You know, property tax, you know, makes a lot of headlines lately. A lot of issues with those. There's always people filing bills to have exemptions for certain kinds of sales tax and things like that. So why income tax? Well, for one, sales tax, as Bishop kind of stated before, you know, that's something you can control. You're being taxed on consumption. I would much rather be taxed on consumption personally. And as far as think of the effect that it has on really our society. Do we want to be taxing spending, or do we want to be taxing productivity? Particularly in the years since COVID, when, you know, for a year or two, the government was telling everyone the best thing to do was be as least productive as possible and stay home. Now we have a situation where we're facing this just labor crisis that just will not break, and we need to find ways to motivate people to get involved, to get out there. You know, that's what I always considered the American dream, to go out there, find something that you're good at, be productive, and find a way to have success, to contribute to your communities. So we don't want to tax that. We want to incentivize behaviors that help our society, that benefit all of us. And going out there, starting a business, earning an income, that's something that does benefit our society. And so that's not something that we need to be looking towards to generate revenue for our state, particularly in the way that some of our spending's been managed over the last several years. I believe over the last decade, I believe that our budget has more than doubled. And I don't know about you guys, I personally don't feel like I'm getting twice the benefit from my government. And some of you might be. I see a lot of head shaking no. So I think that we're probably all in alignment there. So what our bill does, other than eliminate the income tax, it also places caps on spending, which is something that I think has been desperately needed. As it stands right now, and the bill, you know, it's a process. There's a lot of people involved, so it's going to evolve somewhat over time. But as of right now, it would place spending caps cap the increase in spending to the increase in population growth. There's no reason that we need to have our budget continue to shoot up year after year, far exceeding the rate of inflation more often than not. And it's about time that, for a Republican supermajority state, it's about time that we show some fiscal conservatism when it comes to how we do our budget process. So a lot of exciting things here. Outside of the philosophical reasons for wanting to eliminate the income tax and putting our focus on that over all the different kinds of taxes that are out there, is that it works. And there's data that supports this. One thing that you always hear anytime a tax cut bill gets out on the Senate floor, opponents of that usually will say, well, we've already cut taxes. The income tax rate has gone down, a small amount, but it has gone down over the last few years. And yet we don't see the population growth. We're coming off a decade of the slowest rate of population growth in our entire state's history. Just think about that. And, at face value, like some people might take that as a good argument. But then you have to really dig into the numbers and see what's really going on. And that's why I'm holding this stack of paper here. Not just because it makes me look professional. So I have here, and obviously we haven't had a census for a few years. It only occurs every 10 years. So I wanted to get more recent data. And there are some great resources for tracking the migration of population from state to state. One such resource happens to be the U-Haul Growth Index. And so the U-Haul is a company that operates in all 50 states. And if you're moving from one state to another, you generally have a lot of your stuff you have to move. And so U-Haul, it doesn't track exact population numbers, but historically it does an excellent job at tracking population growth and loss trends. And so it's a great resource, and I pulled that up and I just started going through and analyzing the numbers. I can be a little bit of an analytic nerd, so I think it goes back to my college fantasy football days or something like that, but it comes in handy every once in a while. So this lists all 50 states in order from population growth. So at the top you have the states that is for 2024 that received the most new population moving into their state. The bottom states are the states that lost population. So I took a look at this, and I took the rankings, and I started plugging in each state's income tax rate. And it didn't take me long to realize, there were some patterns here that stood out. Out of the top 5 best performing states in terms of population growth, 3 of the top 5 have an income tax rate of 0. Now, if you expand that a couple more spots, let's include the top 7, 4 of the top 7 states have 0 income tax. Missouri is 28th. We can do so much better. The people of Missouri deserve so much better. Now let's look at the bottom. So, I hear someone say California? All right, get her a prize. California is in last place with a whopping income tax of 13.3%. Also, 2 other states, so 3 states in the bottom 5 actually have income tax rates of over 10%, including, no, not Illinois. Illinois was in the top 6, very, very close. But in the top 5, you also have New York with an income tax rate of 10.9%. and New Jersey with an income tax rate of 10.7. Now, I fully expect someone's going to come up with some kind of argument against this when it's brought to the Senate floor. Maybe they'll say, well, these are all states, they're, far away. A lot of these are on the coast, or they have tourism, or this or that, or whatever other kind of lame excuse they come up with to try to deprive the people of Missouri from this income tax relief. So, I decided to go a step further and break down these numbers even more. So what I looked at is I separated out just the states that Missouri is in direct competition with, our bordering states. Because in reality, those are the ones that we are directly competing with to get new people to come here. So you have Tennessee, Kentucky, Arkansas, Iowa, Oklahoma, Illinois, Kansas, and Nebraska, 8 states that border us. And with even the recent cuts, we are still near the bottom of this list. We are in 6th place in terms of population growth. Coincidentally, we are also in 6th place in terms of lowest income tax. And the correlation, it's more shocking than that and goes much further. Out of the 5 states that are ahead of us, every single one of them has a lower income tax. Out of the 3 states behind us, every single one of them has a higher income tax. The correlation, the data is undeniable. And I just really look forward to seeing what arguments they try to make against providing Missourians with this tax relief, given the data when it's placed right in their face. So I really see that we have a great opportunity here. I couldn't tell you how pleased I was the first time I saw our incoming Governor Mike Kehoe at an event, and the first thing he mentioned was phasing out the income tax. My ears perked right up. And he's followed through, mentioned in the State of the State, and has been working with our coalition developing and fine-tuning this plan to get us to that point. Myself, Bishop, Curtis, a few other legislators, and representatives from groups like Americans for Prosperity and Americans for Tax Relief and other groups that have worked on this kind of legislation in states around the country. And they were so gracious to come out and meet with us. And we looked at other states, what was done well, what problems they ran into, and utilized that information as we started crafting this plan and this vision for Missouri's future. And so I can't thank everyone enough that's been a part of this process. I can't thank you all enough, because we can't do it without you, as Bishop said. It's going to take a lot of engagement. The support from the governor is huge. That's going to be pivotal. But this is going to be a battle that needs to be fought on so many fronts. And the grassroots are really an important part of that. So, we need to do everything we can to make your voices heard. Something tells me that your all senator from out here isn't going to be a problem. But, feel free, reach out to anyone. Look at the committees that it's being heard at in the House and the Senate. You can get a list of the committee members, email all of them. Tell them what a difference this bill would make in your life. Personal stories are probably the most impactful thing, at least to me as a legislator. And so that is just huge. And so once again, I want to thank everyone for coming out and for being part of this movement. We really have the opportunity to do something truly historic in our state. And I can't thank you all enough just for the opportunity to be up in the Capitol working on this all for you. Thank you. And before I step away from the mic, I want to introduce a colleague of mine, Senator Curtis Trent, who also is one of the Senate sponsors of this legislation. So let's give him a warm welcome to Washington.
Well, it's great to be here this evening. Really appreciate Mose for hosting us. Appreciate Americans for Prosperity and Gary for all of his work on this. It's been great going around the state. We got a lot more of these that we want to do to talk about this very important issue. And thank you to all of you for being here and giving us some of your time this evening to talk about this issue. And we'll look forward to your questions here in just a moment. I also appreciate the points that were made by my colleagues, Senator Brown and Representative Davidson. They have a keen mastery of the issue and appreciate the points that they brought forward. I'd like to add a couple of things. One, the income tax is a very opaque tax. It's very hard to see how much you're paying on just a day-by-day basis when you compare it with something like a sales tax, a consumption tax, where that percentage is right there on the receipt every time that you engage in a transaction. And there's a psychological component to this that is important to think about because why does the government keep spending more and more money? It's not for no reason. There's a constituency out there for every dollar that the government spends. And the only way that the public is going to have is going to push back against government spending in the long run is when everyone realizes that in order to get the little bit of spending that I want, I'm also having to get all this other spending that I don't want. We all have to back away from the overspending at the same time, and public awareness of the percentage of tax that they're paying is an important part of building the enduring political strength that we need to permanently shrink the size of government, to permanently have less tax burden on our society. That's important for our standard of living. I got interested in tax reform, both the way that taxes are collected and the amount of taxes that are collected, because I got to know a gentleman by the name of Mel Hancock, who was a congressman down in the 7th District of Missouri, and the author of Missouri's Hancock Amendment, which I think probably most everyone in this room has heard of. And that was an attempt to cap the amount of revenue that the state would take in on any annual basis, and peg that to growth over time. So it has worked to save the state, probably billions of dollars over the last 20 to 30 years that has been in effect. But Mel would always say, when we talk about these issues, he'd say, if we don't do something to stop the size and the growth of government, eventually the government is going to crush the private sector. The private sector is not going to be able to compete because too much money has been taken out of it by the public sector and spent on political priorities instead of economic priorities. And I fear that we have, if we have not reached the tipping point, we're very close, because it's not just the tax burden of the state of Missouri, but it's also the tax burden of the federal government that now accounts for, I think, very easily a majority of the economic activity in the country, where it's being redirected away from the priorities of everyone in this room, from your standard of living, from your investments in your businesses and your investments in education, in your own productivity, and it's being put into programs that you would not have selected on your own, which means it's less efficient than it would have been had you been allowed to make the choices yourselves. And so this, in my mind, is the first step, as Representative Davidson said. Hopefully this, if we're successful here in Missouri, other parts of the country, other states will take action as well, and hopefully at some point the federal government will take action as well to not only reduce the burden of government, but also but also to change how those taxes are collected. And I won't go into it because it's a little bit off topic, but especially the federal government also has a massive amount of regulations and other things that act as sort of ghost taxes. You don't really get to quantify those, but they are measured in businesses that are never started, jobs that are never created, dollars that are never earned, and they are drastically reducing the economic output of this country as well. And to take it to 30,000 foot, we've talked a lot about how it's important to us and our own families, our own standard of living here in Missouri, here in Washington, Missouri, but it's also important to our country as a whole and to our place around the globe. One of President Trump's big initiatives that he has had consistently throughout his time in office, his time as president, is the need to reindustrialize our country, the need to bring the supply lines, the manufacturing, the industry back into this country, where it's not only providing jobs and wealth for the people of this country, but it's also providing that national security, that those critical industries are here in this country, where we control both the quality of them, and we know that we're not going to see the supply chains break down around the globe like we saw during COVID, or like we could see if we were in some kind of global conflict. Getting rid of the income tax is a big step to help President Trump in achieving that goal, because the income tax greatly disincentivizes savings and investment, and that is what you need if you want to rebuild the manufacturing in this country. Is you need people have an incentive to save money, to invest that money, and create the capital, the seed corn that we need to rebuild those industries. And with that, our national security goes hand in hand. We have to be able to build ships and planes and tanks and all the things that you need to keep America safe so that we never have to go to war, hopefully, because our enemies and potential enemies know that if they ever do go to war with us, we have the wherewithal to defend ourselves. So, this is an issue that in my mind could not be bigger. It could not be more impactful on the trajectory of both our state and our country, and the trajectory of many of our own personal individual lives as well. So again, thank everyone for being out here this evening. I know we want to do some questions and answers. So I don't know who's going to, we'll get a mic out into the audience here. And who has a question? Oh, right here in the front. You don't have to go far. Here, while he's working on that one, you can use this one.
I actually have two questions. First of all, oh, closer, okay. I was originally from Washington, moved to St. Louis County, and I agree with everything you say here, absolutely right down to the very nitty-gritty. What I'd like to understand is who do I talk to while I'm here so I can bring this message to the Republican committee and the Republican club that I'm presently on and have these people get excited. Because so far, talking into committees, they don't really know much about you. They like the idea of reducing taxes, of course. Everybody likes that. But I'd like to find out who I talk to about that. It's my first question.
All right. Well, we're certainly going to be happy to provide you with whatever information that we can. I put my cell phone on all my cards, so you can get in touch with me directly. And you just kind of let us know what information you need, what format you need it in to deliver this message, and we'll get to work on it.
Yep, that's all. I was going to say the same thing. I'm happy to drive around. I'm a single man without a girlfriend, and this is my mistress for the next 4 months. So, and then you can also. I don't know if that was an okay joke. I'm sorry. Of course, you also should sign up here where you can hear more information as the tax bill progresses and as we continue that conversation.
Are you asking us to fix you up?
Listen, I'll never say no to a nice dinner. So, we got a question right here. Or wait, did you have a question, sir?
I do. I do. I neglected. I wasn't sure just what I was supposed to be studying on, so I didn't get a lot of study done for tonight. But if your resolution, as written, were to pass, what would we see? What would we see directly, and how would that work as it is? I know it'll probably be adjusted through the process.
Yeah, so the resolution as is, I'll tell you, I spent today and I'm going to spend the rest of tomorrow writing a House committee substitute for what's already been filed. So if you don't mind, I'll answer your question based off of that House committee substitute, because that's where we're about to move from this moment forward. It's not what's written right this moment, though. What would happen is you'd have a constitutional amendment that would eliminate your income tax, and it would eliminate personal capital gains taxes, it would do it right then, and what it does is it gets rid of all of that personal income tax form that you get when it comes to Missouri state income taxes. And so you cut out all that bureaucracy at the same time too, right? It would then put a spending cap at 1%, and this is where we get into numbers that are going to change quite a bit probably through this legislative process, but it puts a spending cap at 1%. Unless population grows beyond that, then it grows with population on your budget, okay? That limits us and what we can spend, how much we can spend taxpayer dollars on. Any excess over that spending cap is then captured and put into two funds, into a tax reform fund and then into a rainy day reserve fund. That rainy day reserve fund can be spent if 2/3 of the legislature votes on it. You know, I think of all sorts of disasters that could befall us in the future. It's good to have something tucked away. That tax reform fund will do three things, and it'll do it sequentially. It'll do it in a particular order. First thing it'll do, it will lower your state sales tax rate by 0.01% for every $40 million in that tax reform fund. So you got a spending cap. Say you get an excess of $100 million that comes in. That then is going to go into your tax reform fund. And that following year, you're going to get a 0.02% decrease. And I'll tell you why it's so small in a moment here, in your state sales tax rate, which, by the way, because we eliminated the state income tax, the bill is going to broaden the sales tax base. Not the rate. It's not going to raise the rate. It's going to broaden the base so that there aren't any exemptions. Because we figure, and if you do the math, it's remarkable, a fairer, simpler tax code is a better tax code in 1,000 ways, but if you do this, you can not only eliminate your income tax, you can not only do it revenue neutrally, you can also do it while getting a lower sales tax rate, somewhere in the ballpark of 4.2%. And right now we're at 4.225%. If you broaden that base and you remove all of those exemptions so that we're just paying a broad, low base across the board on our economy. Groceries aren't exempted. Groceries are exempted from our general revenue, but yeah, I mean that would be included. And then the biggest exemptions actually come through like attorneys and services and things like that. It lowers that rate down to 4%, right, by 0.01% increments. Then it caps it constitutionally at that, and it starts to chisel away for every $40 million at the corporate income tax rate. If there is a budget shortfall in the year following any of these reductions, that's when you can draw down from that tax reform fund. That's what I mean by using your growth to buy down your rate. Does that make sense? We're really in the weeds now. And so, but it's good. It's a good question, and it's good to just explain it all to you. As you buy down that rate, and if you need to draw down funds, that's why it's 40 million, that's why it's 0.01, is because those are equivalent in terms of a year of revenue from those places, right? Once you get your corporate income tax down to 0, then the question becomes, well, what should we as Missourians do with excesses in our budget? Because those excesses keep coming because our economy keeps growing, and our government spending shouldn't grow at the same rate that our economy is growing. And so it's written now this way, but there's a lot of changes, a lot of things that could happen. I was thinking long and hard about it and decided let's convert the tax reform fund at that point in time into a strategic gold reserve. And the reason you do that is a lot of reasons, actually. One big reason is that gold is one of the most stable commodities out there. It's got thousands of years of good history, of constant growth. And it goes like this now and again, but it's always good to have commodities backing up your economy, no matter how big or small your economy is. The second good reason to do it is that the U.S. Constitution reserves the right to mint currency to the federal government and the federal government alone, except for one instance, and that is gold. States are, in fact, allowed to mint their own gold currency. Now, I don't think there's any reason that Missouri is going to mint its own currency. Let me be very, very clear. But I figure if I want to be fiscally responsible and I want to be a good conservative, and you can see how young I am, so who knows how long I'm going to live with all technological advancements, I might see the collapse of the American economy at some point in time. I might see the U.S. dollar do some sort of crazy Venezuelan thing. And if or when it does that, I'd love to see Missouri in a strong footing, backed by a clear commodity that could always be converted into a currency if it ever needed to be. And so that's sort of the thinking right now. That's sort of the bill right now. There's some other pieces to it, right? If you wanted to raise your spending cap in times of emergency, there's a mechanism that allows the legislature to double that cap in that given year. But that's the general principle. Is that too much? Did I get a little too? So that's the HCS as written or as about to be written. It's out on my laptop right now. So, yeah, I'm sorry.
I've got a multi-point question here. First of all, the revenue that the present income tax our government collects, what are we spending it on, or what are they spending it on? And if we eliminate the income tax completely, where is that revenue going to come from? And third, if we ask for a complete reversal of the income tax and they say no, or it makes it harder to vote for it, could you allow for maybe a 50% reduction in the tax instead of, all or nothing.
Yeah, that's a great point, sir. So a lot of times, and I'm sorry, a lot of times when you go about...
He's done the deepest dive with the tax experts and DNC, but he's gonna, we don't mind you having a microphone.
Okay. Sorry. Just got some really, really great minds here and great politicians. I'm just humbled, honestly. But a lot of times you guys are brought in more towards the end of a bill's life cycle, whether it's about to pass or about to be voted on or has been voted on, and we need your vote at the ballot. Right now, you're getting brought in at the very front end of it. And so the goal here is not just selling the particulars. I'm going to answer your question, sir. It's not just to get to the particulars of the bill, although I've given you the particulars of it where it's at right now. It's that you feel like you can trust us, right, to make these decisions. It's that you know my heart. You know where I'm trying to go. You know what I'm trying to do. So that when changes come inevitably, you go, well, I did trust him in what he was saying then, and I think we can trust him now on these pieces that are changing over time. The three ways, right? Grow, cut, replace. Those are the three mechanisms to get rid of your income tax. And which of them you do is really determined by how quickly you want to move. I want to move quickly, I'll be honest. I think it should happen like this. But if we go through this legislative process together and we find that it can't be like this, maybe it should be over the course of 4 years, 10 years, 20 years, 5 years, 6 months. I don't know, right? You tell me the number, and if that's what it takes to politically accomplish the end, well, then we've got to start reworking those pieces, and it's going to be reworked in the ways that I talked about, right? What I can generally tell you is the sandbox we've established is we want a spending cap on our legislature. I don't know if it's 1%, I don't know what it is yet, but we want a spending cap on the legislature. We want a mechanism to capture the growth that you guys create, and we want a mechanism for getting that growth right back into your own pockets, right? And I can tell you we are committed to not cutting services, but you look at other states like Tennessee, only state in the union, by the way, 48 states lose population and income to Florida. One state doesn't, it's Tennessee. And they are at the top when it comes to public services as well, and they're going like this on their public services. Income taxes aren't just about money in your pockets, it's actually about revenue growth and revenue stability, something folks don't talk about, budget stability in providing public services for Missourians, and that is at the forefront of our mind. I'll tell you, for me personally, a lot of folks like to look at who's at the top. And then I find it to be pretty envious, and they look at the top and they go, well, this person's getting that and this and the other. I like to look at the guy at the bottom. And I go, what does his life look like? Is it a decent life? Does he have his necessities met? Does he have some wants, right, that he's able to meet too? Is he able to take care of those around him? That's what I care about. And so we're not in the business of just cutting that revenue. That's not possible. Your question, it's $8.4 billion after refunds. Income tax revenue generation goes into our general revenue fund. What is that spent on? That's a discretionary fund. That means it's spent all over the place, right? A little bit everywhere. I'm not trying to cut any of those. And I don't think we're going to cut any of those. And that's why I talked about that revenue neutrality, right? And then taking that steady growth mindset in terms of lowering our rate over time. But if we did it tomorrow, it'd be replacing it. And what we'd replace it with, that was your other question, is that 4.2% sales tax rate, broad-based across the way. Now, if we start talking about groceries, for instance, you mentioned groceries, and if we get into some big old fight where, hey, the only way this is going to pass is if we exempt groceries, well, okay, let's start figuring that out. But what it's going to do, it's going to raise your rate, right, if you do that. It's going to raise your rate on everything else. And what I'll tell you about groceries, it's not the sales tax at the end of it. It's not the 1.225% that you pay right now from the state that's really getting you on the groceries. You know what's getting you on the groceries? It's what Curtis was talking about. It's all that stuff hidden behind that transaction, because that income tax is affecting every single step of that supply chain, and it is bumping up the price, bumping up the price, bumping up the price. When they talk about distortionary taxes, distortionary economics, what they're talking about is how much of a weight does it bear down on each of those little levers. And I'll tell you this, income tax is the most distortionary of all. Not all taxes are equal. And a dollar in sales versus a dollar in income has a much different impact on your wallet, on the economy, on our homes, on everything.
So just one thing before we get to the next questions is the emphasis, and what I'm so keen on is you always hear, especially in DC, it's not a revenue problem, it's a spending problem. And so that cap, that 1% cap of what we spend as a state government, that is huge because you're going to get the revenue, and whatever bucket it's going to come through, all of the machinations and the changes in the exchanges of a sales tax, what's included, what's not included, that's all going to be modified, the House Committee substitute, as we do these meetings, get some more feedback, get more analysis. But sticking with that 1% cap, that's what's going to rein in the spending because we're hardworking Missourians. We get the revenue, we do the hard work. Unfortunately, we get taxed for that work. Right now, we can get taxed through the consumption process of that sales tax. We'll still get revenue to the government, but by capping it, we'll build those funds up to keep paying it down. So that's the key is that cap, because we got to force the government to restrict that because who knows who's going to be the next governor, the next General Assembly, who wants to spend wildly like drunken sailors, no insult to sailors.
I think there was one other aspect of your question. I think you referenced if hit some roadblocks, could you find a middle ground where maybe you cut half of it? And we have worked through a number of iterations of this proposal as well. And the initial bill filing actually would slowly, instead of eliminating the income tax instantly, it would tick it down over time. So as originally filed, it would create this reserve fund. When the fund hit a certain balance level, in a year where it hits about that balance, it would tick down 0.1%, and that would be, we'd be looking at like well over a decade before it'd be completely phased out. And then we started getting numbers back, and it was showing that when we broaden the sales tax base, that would really compensate for eliminating it entirely. And we realized that there is a path here to where we can do this now. We don't have to talk about a decade, 2 decades off, because who knows what our neighboring states are going to be doing by then. And then maybe we need to take the lead, and we really have the opportunity. And like my colleague said, it's going to be an evolving process, but we do have different variations of this plan that where if there is pushback, we do have a number of different paths we could go down.
So I think also important to note, because you ask, well, what if you, left half of the income tax in place, if that were necessary to get it done? I think that's not where we want to go, because then you risk having both a sales tax and an income tax, which is what we have right now, and that's what's causing the harm. As Representative Davidson said in his initial remarks, this is our state income tax started like 0.5%, something like that. It was very low. And so as long as it exists, the ability for it to creep up remains. And so it'd be better for that to eventually hit 0, and then basically there'd be a constitutional prohibition on an income tax to make sure that future General Assemblies can't bring it back without a vote of the people to do that. Again, I think getting to 0 is very important.
Okay, I may be ignorant about your bill, but when you say to eliminate income tax, is that for a working wage or all sources of income? I'm over 70 and still working because I have to be able to make sure I have the money to pay for the income tax that I have to pay on my other sources of income. And so it would be really nice if I didn't have to work anymore.
Well, I think as it's written right now, includes capital gains as well. So to the extent that you're talking about capital gains as a source of income that you're having to pay on, yes, that would be eliminated also. And for those that don't know, the way you pay capital gains in Missouri is through the income tax. Yes.
Thank you for doing this tonight, and as you can tell by my accent, I'm not from around here, originally. We moved out here about 3 years ago from New Hampshire. New Hampshire doesn't have an income tax, doesn't have a sales tax, has a lot of fees, but they're not called sales taxes.
You can't sneeze without a fee.
But my question to you is, if you eliminate the income tax, what guarantee is it that the real estate property tax won't go through the roof? In New Hampshire, the average real estate property tax is about $8,000 a year. And out here, we thought pretty reasonable.
Well, so those taxes are local taxes, your property taxes. And so I would encourage people not to vote to increase them. But ultimately, these are all political questions. The public gets what it wants. And so at the end of the day, if the public votes to raise its own taxes, I mean...
So, and then the other piece is that we don't have a statewide assessed real estate tax here in Missouri, and we're not planning on introducing one. So, I mean, it's kind of simple as that. As far as the locals are concerned, this won't change $1 of their revenues. Now, if they keep raising your rates, whether it's by doing it through sneaky assessments, right, which we've tried to pass legislation to work on that, or by raising your rates by putting it on the ballot, I mean, that becomes, of course, still up to the locals to vote down those or to vote out the people who keep putting them on the ballot in the first place. But as far as we're concerned, we're not even entertaining. I haven't heard it talked about once in any of my conversations that we're going to do some sort of state-assessed real estate. The state government doesn't support the local communities tax-wise. No, so education spending, right? The state does a state adequacy target. There's all sorts of things in which the state government, whether it's through grants or MoDOT or DESE or whatever it might be, there's all sorts of ways in which dollars get back to locals. All I was telling you is that as far as a state-assessed real estate tax, which some states have, we don't have one, and it's not a part of the conversation that we might. Well, that's a great question, and that's why we're doing this in a way that's revenue neutral, and so it's not going to change anything of what we're spending on or how we're spending on any more than it was already going to change. You know what I mean? The only thing it's changing is whether or not it's sneaky and quiet and behind that transaction, or if it's transparent and forward with all of Missourians and in front of them on their receipt.
I think, like Bishop said, that this leaves out local government altogether, which is where your property real estate taxes come from. So it would have no impact. Where if it's revenue neutral, that means the state brings in the same amount of revenue than it would through the income tax. So it wouldn't change anything as far as the revenue coming in the state. It wouldn't change anything as far as what the state provides to local governments either. And so that would have zero impact. So, could there be some kind of opportunistic local politician that thought people might not get that and use it as an excuse to try to raise taxes? I don't know. But it wouldn't have any legitimacy towards any reason why any local government would raise those.
And that's why we're having these tours, and they're going to be going around the state and trying to explain it and get those facts out, because as this process unfolds, the big government, high tax people are going to come out and they're going to try to tell you otherwise, and they're going to say to try to have you not vote for this plan when it gets to the ballot. It's like, oh, your real estate taxes are going to go out the roof, and just like the Amendment 3 abortion liars, people like that are going to be lying to you too about this proposal.
It was mentioned that if this gets through both houses, that it would go to the vote of the people and amend the state constitution, correct?
Correct.
So what about IP reform? We need to get that done so that they can't convince uneducated voters later on that, oh, we need to put income tax back and 51%, and it's back. So let's get IP reform done.
If we had this proposal and IP reform on the same ballot, then the IP reform would not affect the passage of this, and it would just be the different standard would be there going forward. Now, I suppose if this didn't pass and you passed IP reform, then any future proposal of this nature would also have to
depends on if
pass
it's
under
ratification reform or IP reform too. But yeah.
Well, certainly, and there's many different varieties of IP reform but presumably any IP reform will create a different standard that, could make it harder or easier to pass.
What you
it,
should
depending on
know
what
is that
standard
every
is.
single one of these lawmakers in front of you have fought hard for initiative petition reform. I know I've personally filed it literally every year that I've been there, and it is hard like the dickens to get through that legislative process. And I'm not entirely sure why. I've got theories. I think I know why, but you're exactly right. It's never bad for us to always keep our eye on the ball when it comes to initiative petition reform, and hopefully we see some real movement on that this year.
And it's still a priority, but because of this proposal and because of the working group with Amendment 3 response, the timing of IP reform is going to be a little more delicate, unfortunately, and puts us a little bit in a box, but we want to get some other things done. But once it is done, then we can kind of shut the door on outside people trying to go around the legislature. So we're very, aware of that, but we got to be real careful how we go about all those.
So I filed 2 Senate joint resolutions this year. It was to phase out the income tax and initiative petition reform. It's something that I put everything I could into in the final weeks of the session last year, and one of the biggest disappointments I've had in my time in the legislature was the day that bill got sent back to the House, and I knew that it was done. It really was heartbreaking, and I knew people around the state were going to be so disappointed, and it was really, really difficult. So that was one of the first 3 things that I filed this year, and I have every intention of pressing it all the way to the finish line.
Sure. First of all, thank you very much for having this forum. We really appreciate it, especially the transparency into the early technical details. Thank you. To that end on technical details, you'd indicated, I love the sales spin down. So you get a 1-to-40, 1-to-50 ratio. That should theoretically take us from a 4.25 down to probably about a 4.2%. You also indicated that there is an allowance in there for a emergency budget cap where you can double that. Question is, using John's words over here, when our liberal friends come in and start spending like drunken sailors, is that bidirectional? What happens if we bust the cap? Does the rate go up? And what caps that so we don't end up with a total sales tax rate here in Washington of 9.5% versus the 8.85 where it currently sits?
Yeah. No, that's a good question. So right now the rate would go from 101%, that spending cap, to 102%. That's what I mean by the doubling of that cap. But it wouldn't change the tax rates at all. That's a separate part of the Constitution. So if it became, and I always operate as if Missouri is going to eventually become liberal, right? Or at least fall into the hands of folks who aren't conservative. Spoiler alert, it's actually never been in conservative hands. But anyways, that's why I always tell folks, well, you're a red state. Yeah, but we've never been a majority conservative, not yet. They would have to change the Constitution. It has no indication, it would have no influence on the tax rate. It would only have an influence on the spending cap if they continued to vote in a higher spending cap, which means you would slow down the process of reducing your rates.
So does that literally mean that the sales tax rate can only go down in that scenario, the way the bill is proposed?
The way the bill is proposed, yeah. So it would go down to 4%, and then it gets capped at 4%. And so it can't go back up at that point in time. Yeah. So.
But who's exempted on the taxes? So you said that they're going to stop the exemptions.
Yeah.
And we'll be paying taxes on things we're not paying right now.
Yeah.
Lobbyists.
So the exemptions, yeah, the biggest exemptions, you have about 200 exemptions. Some of them are pretty small, like sales tax exemption on textbooks. And then some are quite significant. The biggest sales tax exemption we have today is a sales tax exemption on services, which is a consumption that we consume similarly to what we'd consume in a good. And so we'd be taxing those services in addition to the goods. And so it'd be a broad-based sales tax across all consumption in our economy. Real estate? I mean, real estate is one of the ones that's exempted right now. Yeah. Yes, yeah. No, if someone buys a $500,000 home, there's a 3% commissioner's fee, and they would pay a sales tax on that commissioner fee. That's the service. So I'm going to go back here. There was a couple of folks asking. Yeah.
So you kept mentioning ghost businesses, correct? Ghost regulations. Do you believe in addressing the ones who are taking advantage of the system? Because if we were able to identify who's taking advantage, it would be able to put more money in the people's pockets. So do you have any type of solution or direction in that? Because it's all about compassion and God, and I really liked how you guys spoke and having us. Thank you.
Well, I was talking specifically about the federal government, although I think this is a problem that exists to a lesser extent at state government as well. You have a lot of, you have all these different agencies that divided amongst different sectors of the economy, or different issues, and many of them are empowered to issue regulations. And every time they do that, it usually imposes some kind of cost or burden on the private sector. And in my mind, those act as sort of ghost taxes. Like, you don't really see, like, there's no bill that is paid, but, if it's too hard to start a new business because you have to wait 60 days, and you have to get 10 licenses, and you have to, file all the paperwork in triplicate, and you have to do all these different things. You have to have inspectors come out. Like, at some point, you reach a critical mass where an individual is likely to say, I just can't comply with that. I'd have to hire a lawyer. It would be $500, dollars an hour for 10 hours of high-end legal work to get this done. I just can't afford to start my business anymore. I'll tell you, in my personal experience, my father was a refrigeration repairman. That's what he did for his line of work. And we had a little farm too, but it was the refrigeration repair work that paid the bills. And if you'll recall, back in the early 90s, the EPA required that you start collecting refrigerant. You could no longer just release it. It was the R12 refrigerant. They made it illegal, which was a really good refrigerant, all told. But they made it illegal and phased it out, and you had to buy a reclamation unit in order to lawfully perform that kind of service work. So we had to buy $2,000, $3,000, $4,000, I don't know how many thousands of dollars of equipment in order just to continue to do the work that he'd already been doing his whole life. And that's how the government just imposes a new expense on business that nobody gets to really measure, but he had to reclaim the cost of that unit. And so every time he went out on a call, every time he worked for someone, he had to add just a little bit more cost to the bill. And that's true of gas. That's true of all the regulations on vehicles. All that stuff adds up. The economists will tell you, the people who study the stuff will tell you that the extent of those regulations is probably equivalent almost to another income tax worth of cost at the federal level. I don't know if that's true or not. It's really hard to measure, but the cost is extremely significant. It puts America at a competitive disadvantage with the rest of the world. And really, there's no easy or quick solution to do this, although there have been some positive developments in this area. Like, we basically need to stop the agencies from just being able to regulate without congressional oversight. Congress needs to be able to weigh in and say this is a good or a bad regulation. We're going to allow it or not. There was a bill a few years ago. I filed this bill in the past called the REINS Act, which basically would say that if an agency issues a regulation with a cost greater than some trigger level, I think it was $150 million of impact at the federal level. It was a much lower impact at the state level. Then the legislature would have to basically ratify whether or not that regulation would be allowed under the statute. So something like that to rein in, no pun intended, to prevent the agencies from just in this extra legal process writing new laws and making whatever regulation they want is, in my mind, the way to go about it.
I think there might be a pun intended there, but we'll go to the another question. Or I'm sorry, no, okay, never mind. We do have another question back here. My bad.
First of all, again, thank you for having this session and also bringing up this bill and pushing this bill and doing the things, because I think this experiment called America was founded on 2% tax on tea, and so where we're at now is a little bit ridiculous. But I guess my challenge is, I like the fact that you've got a cap on spending, but I would challenge you to make that cap negative. And you talked about, we're replacing the revenue with sales tax, but that's still a burden on us. Even though it's in front of us and we see it and we can make that choice, it's still us funding this $54 billion budget that's absolutely ridiculous. So my challenge, I guess, is thank you for doing this, but how can we continue to, do we need a Missouri Doge? Can we have zero-based, can we have zero-based budget? Why isn't that part of this bill? You cannot have a budget unless it's zero-based and approved by whoever, because what you spent last year plus a little bit, that wouldn't fly anywhere else. So again, I'm not trying to criticize the whole thing, because I think this is great in the right direction, but at some point, how do we really make an impact for Missourians?
No, I could. No, I was going to say I could not agree with you more. Limiting spending is, it's kind of bittersweet. Like, it's long past time, but like I agree, spending's been so out of control. I think I referenced earlier how our budget's more than doubled in the last decade. That being said, if we were to go out there, and this is going to face so much resistance, just the caps alone, and there is a political aspect of what is possible right now, given what we have to work with and the people that we have to get to go along with this in order to get something passed. And one of the most frustrating things for me, coming from being a small business owner, getting to call the shots, and I can run things, manage the books and run things as efficiently as I choose to take time and the care to do so. And then I go in and work in the building where it's not just you making the decisions. You have to be able to work and actually get something through the process. Ultimately, I think that placing the spending caps would be a huge achievement right now. But I agree. I would like to see that weaned off of, and along with that, our dependence on federal dollars, which has just grown tremendously. That's something that it keeps me up at night sometimes, just thinking about how much we've grown that dependence on federal money. Because with federal money comes control also, and so I agree that's the direction we need to move in. But in order for us to get this done and bring home this one now, we're going to do is push as hard and as far as we possibly can. That being said, we don't want to push to the point where we're going to walk away with absolutely nothing, because we get spending caps in place this year. Maybe next year it opens up the doors to where we can start pulling it back the right direction. But something like that, the budget didn't balloon like this. It didn't happen in 1 year. It didn't happen overnight. And unfortunately, the reality is we're not going to fix it overnight either. Yeah. It's going to take incremental steps. This would be a great incremental step for us. And from there, we can continue to build on that. And 5 years out from now, who knows? But I'm optimistic with the coalition we've been able to build and the kind of support that we're getting around this plan. And it makes me very hopeful for the future and the direction we'll be able to bring the appropriations process.
I recently was appointed the vice chair of the budget committee in the House. What I will say is, depending on where your spending cap is, you are effectively limiting your government right out the gates, because we've been growing at a much higher rate than what the spending cap is right now. The General Revenue Fund, that's not federal COVID dollars. The General Revenue Fund, that's just our dollars. That spending has grown by 35% in the last 8 years. So what I'll tell you, though, is if I go in and I slash the budget right now, I'm term limited. You know that. What do you think happens in a few years when I'm not here? Don't they just start spending it again? But what if I put a spending cap that's in the Constitution, and then I cut the budget. You see? There's a broader vision here, is what I'll tell you, and Senator Brown spoke to it, directly. It's incremental. Now, this is a massive step in a big incremental plan. But what I would ask you is keep that vision in mind, keep our feet to the fire, trust but verify as you were, but also coalesce around this moment right now. I'll be honest, I think if we put more, like what you're talking about, into the bill, I don't think it'd work. No. No, and I think at some point is not very far off, and you got to keep on saying it. I mean, you got to keep saying it from the back of the room. I think that's very important. And what I'm telling you is that each future reduction in our budget is amplified tenfold when you have a spending cap in place.
Yeah, and keep in mind, like, the most effective way to spend less is for the revenue never to hit the Treasury in the first place. And, over the last 8 years plus, we have cut taxes repeatedly, and that has reduced. So even as the economy has grown and more money has come into the Treasury, that's in the face of declining percentages of tax collected. So the goal has always been to try to draw down the rate of growth by reducing the tax burden to accomplish that. And this will be a huge step in that direction, even though we're only talking about the way in which taxes are collected right now instead of how much taxes are collected. Again, once the public sees that bill, they're going to be much more resistant to doing things that increase the budget, which, is a lot of that increase, or, a good significant portion of that increase was when the public passed Medicaid expansion and drew down a whole bunch more money from the federal government. So, it's something that we all need to work on to be part of the community, to be out there talking to our friends and neighbors, to tell them, don't vote in more taxes, don't vote in more spending, and help. It's a team effort, truly, to help keep the budget low.
And we just kind of want to keep the momentum that, like Gary mentioned and Representative Davidson, where the governor is taking the lead. He's got, kind of that pulpit to kind of be a vocal person. He talked about it in the campaign. I was wondering, is this just going to a campaign talk? Is he going to continue with it? And to our, happiness, he talked about it at the State of the State address that he gave us last week. And so we got that person that can be a cheerleader. We got the people up here, a lot of other people back in Jefferson City that are colleagues of us that will make it that way. And this is just the first down payment of the tax reform. If we can get this through the finish line in May, and then eventually, to the ballot, and you guys can cheerlead it, then we go after personal property tax. We go after, other taxes that are on the books, and we can make ourselves more competitive as a state and bring more families in, bring more businesses, spread that level of who's going to be taxed at the sales tax level, and then we do rise and we grow together in a sensible way rather than being, kind of an upside down way.
We have a question over here.
Question and a comment to kind of expand on real quickly. I'm a fan of lower taxes, like pretty much everybody in the room, I'm sure. But I don't think anybody in this room is probably impressed with the fiscal responsibility of the great state of Illinois. But if you look at 10 years ago, the rate that we spend in Missouri was dollar for dollar with Illinois. That means we're half as fiscally responsible as the pathetic state of Illinois. We got to fix that.
And I think the beauty of a spending cap is it forces that fiscal responsibility, right? It ties the hands of the legislature, which obviously they have proven that they need their hands tied. I think you make a perfect point there.
I do want to clarify, though, Illinois spends a lot more money than we do. Like, just their general revenue is more than our total state expenditures.
If I'm not mistaken, their state budget is only about $50 billion.
No, that's just their GR. That's just their general revenue. Yeah. They're spending, I think, it's really hard to go off, it's dangerous to go by memory. I think it's over $200 million or something or $200 billion that they're spending. So yeah, Yeah, they're don't worry, we're not Illinois. Okay. Other questions? Oh, yeah.
Sorry, I was Googling the numbers there.
Well, good evening. Thank you again for being here. So my name is Marcos. I'm actually on the board of directors for Missouri Tax Relief Now, which also Representative Ben Keefley, who's one of the bill sponsors, is as well. And I've been spending some time at the Capitol, and I know that the overwhelming majority of Republicans are in favor of this type of legislation, this type of tax policy, and there's a large coalition. I mean, we're at Missouri Tax Relief Now. We're so grateful for AFP Missouri for what they're doing for the grassroots side of things. But there are some obstacles. So what can folks in this room do to target some of those Republican, colleagues who are not in favor of this? How can we communicate to our legislators effectively to make sure that they understand that this is not a want, it's a need, and that we will fight for it?
Yeah. I mean, what I'd say is everyone should talk to their lawmaker whether or not they know they support it or don't know they support it. I mean, I don't care if your lawmaker is one of the sponsors. I think you should talk to your lawmaker, sort of what Gary had mentioned before. But then it's tapping into the resources that we're piecing together here, right? We've got AFP here. We've got a thing for you to sign up with right there, a little QR code. MoTax Relief Now has one of the most effective grassroots networks across the state. I think joining them is a really good effort. And we're in communication with Dennis. We're in communication with Gary. We're talking with folks, and we're strategizing and trying to figure out, okay, so when are those points that we need to apply pressure? When are those points that we need to reward good behavior? It's a pretty comprehensive sort of strategy. What I'd encourage anyone to do is just signing up for all of these things so that you can get as much information as possible. You're not going to get too much information. You can unsubscribe at the end of May. We just have to get it across the line.
Other questions?
Let me add to that real quick. We did put cards on your table here, and I know that you have a bill sponsor here that is your senator, and I'd love for you all to write a card to him so we can take it to the committee with him. He's the chair of the committee, and he can demonstrate these are cards from my constituents that care about this issue. So I would ask you to do that before you leave. Hand that to us or hand it to Senator Brown. Or if you know a young lady that maybe wants to be Bishop's girlfriend, you could write that on there too. And then one more thing, and we'll go back to Q&A for a few more minutes. Another way you can get involved is we are going to the Capitol this Tuesday, and if you all are free, please see me or Savannah, and we can give you more details about that. But we're going to physically go office to office to the representatives, talking to them about this bill. We're going to have a rally outside the Capitol around 9:30. So if you're free and available and would like to come over to Jefferson City, we would love to have you join us. We're going to have a large presence with Missouri Tax Relief Now and AFP partnering to have a strong presence. And that's the day that this bill will be in the House committee. So we want to have a strong presence that day. So that's another way you can get involved.
Yeah. It's getting heard in a committee that Representative Simmons is the vice chair of. So.
Yeah, so whether it's Gen Laws with Representative Keithley or the special committee on tax policy that Jeff Coleman is the chair for that, either one of those committees, whether it's a card for his committee or the card or get a second card or even email at john.simmons@house.mo.gov, send me emails of similar messages and I'll be able to print that off and again present that as testimony into that committee to my colleagues and to the chair.
And yeah, well, the House will be having hearings for this HJR next Tuesday, and there'll be the rally. And then a week from next Wednesday, I plan on hearing these bills in the committee that I chair in the Senate. And this will be one thing I don't believe was mentioned earlier. That is actually to accomplish all this is actually two pieces. There is a statutory bill and then the joint resolution that changes the Constitution. So you can't do this without both of those pieces. In the Senate, we haven't had any SJR, Senate Joint Resolutions, referred to committee yet, but we're still going to proceed because we have all the Senate bills in the committee. So we're going to go ahead and hear those and get those moving. And then the day we get the joint resolution part referred, we're going to be hearing those and voting them out right away and just keep the train rolling.
We have just, let's see here, we have about 17 more minutes before they close here. So we'll just try and go through a few other questions quickly, and then allow maybe 10 minutes for folks to come and chat with us if they'd like to, or get on out here. We want to be respectful of our hosts. We really appreciate you guys. We've got a question back here.
I represent a large property management and development company here in Franklin County, and will tenants will tenants be taxed on rent, sales tax, with this new deal?
It's a taxation on the final on a final product at the final point of sale, and so that doesn't include tenants or rental income or rental sales. So, yeah. No, they do, yeah, and those are more along the lines of like value-added taxes, and we're not looking at value-added taxes here. Yeah. You know, I guess I think daycare would be a service. I think that would probably be taxed at a 4.2% rate. Oh wait, yeah. Here, let me grab a mic for you.
4.2 additional, or is it 4.2 on what is exempt currently?
Yeah, that's a really good question. It's not 4.2 additional. It is a 4.2% state sales tax rate across the board. Yeah, on services, on goods, on all of it. And so that's a great question. I appreciate you clarifying that. Here, do you want to?
No, I'll just ask you because you stand here. We have a small business, plumbing, so we charge sales tax obviously on material that we use, but we would be charging a tax on the labor?
Yeah, yes. So that's yeah, the labor. So right now in Missouri, you actually, if you buy if you like buy tires at an auto shop, and you buy the tires and the labor at the same time, you actually pay a sales tax on the labor as well. If you separate them in invoices, you don't pay on them both. It's kind of a strange little loophole thing that exists right now. But yeah, you would be taxed on services across the, as the HCS is about to be written. It's not technically written this way yet. It's literally on the laptop. It would be a taxation on services across the board, which would include plumbing services as well. Yeah, literally all services, right? It literally is all services. It's final points of sale.
So bottom line, if you get rid of all of it, is it going to help us or hurt us in the long run? You got to think about the past. A lot of our families have been.
The question is it going to help us or hurt us in the long run? So, would you? Here, wait. Trying to decide if we should break so that you can come talk to me individually, because there's a lot of side conversation. I don't mind the side conversations,
and real
but
quick, I did look up the Illinois number. It's 123 billion.
So, here.
No, their GR is.
I don't want to interrupt all of the
13.
conversations here, but I also want to make sure to give a good, clear answer. And so I'll ask you guys to just hold off on the side conversations just one moment. Hey, can I answer this really quick? Yeah. Okay, sorry. The question was, and generally there's kind of two questions together. Is this going to hurt us or is this going to help us, right? At the end of the day, this is undoubtedly going to help. You look at the 9 states without income taxes right now, and they are doing better in public services. They're doing better on job growth. They're doing better on wage growth. They're literally doing better on every metric that you can measure. And then you look at the states with income taxes and the states that have recently introduced income taxes as recently as 1993 in Connecticut, and they are doing the opposite. They are literally plummeting. You look at Missouri and our GSP in relation to GDP, it is plummeting. We are a state that is in atrophy. Entropy. What's the entropy? Both words work, I guess. So there we go. This is the sort of dramatic action that we have to take. This is the revolutionary action that we have to take to put Missouri on a right foot that may feel different. Without a doubt, it's going to feel different. But honestly, as you guys ask me and go, well, is it going to tax this or is it going to tax that? Yeah, it's going to tax this and it's going to tax that. And that tax is going to appear at the bottom of your invoice, and I hope you're a little pissed off by it too. I always say I don't mind that sales tax because what it does is it shows you how much the government is taking from you all the time. And honestly, you should be a little bit angry at your government all the time. You should know that you're getting taxed on things that maybe you don't feel is right. And then you should channel that energy into accountability on your lawmakers and how they spend those taxpayer dollars. So not only do I think it creates a better culture around the way that we look at our government, the way that we interact with our government, because I know this is a room that's engaged. I mean, look at you guys coming out here on a Friday night like this. This is awesome. I know this is a room that's engaged, but how many Missourians and how many people aren't engaged right now? How many people are excited when they get a $2,000 tax return after April, not realizing that the feds just stole that money from them and didn't give it back and didn't pay it back with interest? Don't we want a tax that ticks us off a little bit? Don't we want a tax that we can see right there in front of us with our eyes? Don't we want a tax that maybe awakens some of our neighbors that wouldn't come out to an event like this on a Friday night? I'll concede it's going to feel different. And it's going to cause strain and strain in different ways. But what I can tell you is that the states moving in this direction are doing better. What I can tell you is that every economist will tell you that these income taxes are distortionary and having negative effects on you. And what I can tell you is that for the future, it's going to create something beautiful for our children, for their children, for all of our posterity. And when we put it in the Constitution like this, it doesn't matter who gets elected 10, 20 years from now, whether they're moderate Republican or a Democrat, because we will have bound their hands here and now, and we will have put our children in a situation that keeps them frustrated and angry at their government and constantly saying, hey, I saw you take a little bit of money from me when I went to that doctor. Hey, I saw that 4% when I went and got a plumbing service. What are you doing with it? Because right now, we tax our people, and half of them don't even know they're taxed or to what extent they're taxed. So I understand the fret. I understand the concern. And what I want you to know, and I hope that you feel, is it weighs on me. My goodness, it weighs on me. What an immense decision we have before us and before our body. But I promise you, we are doing the numbers. We are crunching the numbers. We're making sure we're not sacrificing services. We're trying to create a better future for our children and for their children, for ourselves, and I think it is the good and right thing to do, no matter the challenges that it brings in front of us.
And you look at other states that have moved in this direction. For instance, Florida, it seems like everyone knows somebody that moved to Florida these days, a zero income tax state. They have a sales tax, I believe it's over 10%. Yeah, almost 11%. And so what we're talking about doing is eliminating the income tax. And sure, there will be services that will be brought in because services were prohibited from being taxed on sales tax years ago because there were some very well-funded special interest groups that went out and passed a constitutional amendment to put that in place. And that's one of the reasons why we've been handcuffed when it comes to reducing personal property tax, reducing income tax, all these other things. But you talk to anyone that moves to Florida, at least I can speak for my aunt who moved there a few years back, and financially they are so much better off in Florida not having to pay that income tax. And we're finding a way to do this without touching property tax. It's left completely unaffected. All it would do is put our sales tax more in line with what most of these other states are doing, except instead of raising our sales tax rate, ours is actually still going down, a minimal amount, but still it would be going down to a lesser rate than it is right now. So just something to keep in mind while we're discussing these changes. I know, I don't want to see any taxes increase. I mean, the rate's not increasing, but just the things that it would be applicable to. But to eliminate the income tax, that's what's going to bring people here. That's what's going to keep people here. And I'm not just speaking for myself. I'm speaking for every person that I've ever met that's lived in a no income tax state that maybe you pay a little bit more somewhere else, but in the long run, there is absolutely no comparison. Yes.
I just want to make a quick comment to support what you just said. My wife and I are just about to retire, and I'm looking at all of these instances that you talk about, the income tax, all the other unfair taxes, and how in the heck we're going to continue to pay that in our retirement without having to go back to work, as another person said here, just to pay those taxes. And here's what I have done. I have done about 35 to 40% of my research, and so far it is leading me, and I hate to say this because I've lived here all my life, it's leading me to go, I might want to move to Florida, which is where my stepsister moved, and I couldn't understand that, what I do now. And I'm also looking at moving to Tennessee. I could not believe when I looked at that, I go, these guys, Missouri needs to wake up, and wake up pretty quickly, because right now, in my mind, we got to make a decision within the next year or two whether we're going to stay or we're going to go where we can actually thrive.
And to wake up quickly, when I got first introduced to this concept in early December, I was with Bishop and some other people in Washington, D.C., where he unveiled that to a lot of our colleagues that are at a conference. And I was super excited about the idea, the concept. He went over some of the details with the cap and whatnot. But then the sticking point to me, and I think he realized it too, and a lot of the people, is that, and even the governor, it was taking a long time to kind of get there with these pay downs and paying down the rate and whatnot, you know, depending on the growth. And it would have been 12, 15, 20 years potential. And it's like, we need something more immediate. So that's where this House committee substitute and kind of working at it from a different angle now. And I'm excited because I don't know all the details and kind of got wind of it a little bit earlier. But what he's talking about, I'm excited to kind of see what the new vision is and actually getting it to that point a lot quicker than what the original version was. So stay tuned, AFP, your people up here, the people back in other districts, if you're not from this district, we'll get that information out to you, but we need an army, and I'm looking at some good soldiers out here. One last thing, Mike, get up here, please. I just want to make sure we thank you again. This guy is such a rock star in Franklin County. He hosts so many things for the cause, different meetings, different groups. He's always giving to conservatism. He's a God-fearing man. He has the right thoughts in his heart. He wants to help us. He's been a great help to me. I know to Senator Brown, like you mentioned earlier. So we can't thank you enough for what you do. You should get way more credit than you're getting. We want to make sure that everyone realizes how much we appreciate you.
Well, I thank you very much. I want to say one thing. It won't take me very long here because we are concerned about Franklin County right now. We got two commissioners here, Paul Oversmith and Ken Cox right there, which is amazing. Guys, I sat on the couch way too long, and our commissioners are right now some of the most conservative we have right now. Tim Brinker is resigning. I'm not upset about this, guys. I'm not upset. But our county clerk, Tim Baker, is right back there. We need to contact the governor and ask him to be appointed as our other commissioner. We need this desperately, because if we don't, we're going to look at the governor appointing other ones that you do not want. And I guarantee you it won't be good. So we need to make those phone calls to the governor.
Write this down. I have a email that you can send this, who's the director of boards and commissions, who will be working with the governor, K-E-R-I, Carrie.Stewart, S-T-U-A-R-T, so Carrie.Stewart at governor.mo.gov. Email her. She's creating the file. She'll get that information about the clerk and Tim, and that's one way you can contact that and try to get the swell that Mike's talking about.
Right, because I believe they want to appoint shots.
Carrie, K-E-R-I, .Stewart, S-T-U-A-R-T, at governor.mo.gov, G-O-V.
This is very important because I believe they're going to put somebody like Shots in there. And we cannot have that. We can't. That's why I'm telling you it's important. Get involved. Tell your friends to contact the governor and get this done, just like John was saying. And get Tim Baker. Tim, stand up. Right there. He is a God-fearing man. We are blessed. I hate to lose him as a county clerk, but man, would he make a great commissioner with these three guys. I've been here 34 years, and we'll see the commission move better than we ever have for us, not for other institutions in Franklin County, which I don't have. And you can rewatch this on SBG Media on YouTube, okay? So anytime, if you want to go back and watch all this, you can watch it again on that site. Thanks, guys. And thank you for coming out, guys. I appreciate it.